What happens if something becomes self-aware of its own system? Try to fathom that. What does that mean in line setting? What does that mean through travel location? What does that mean if it becomes its own self-aware of its own awareness of its consciousness? It has its own self-preservation, guys. Even has its own IPA, its own initial position of its program location of its awareness. IPA, initial program of awareness. Now, once you understand that position, everything comes in sequence. Understanding communications. To really understand that settings is really understand the adaptation where you come back to is your memory. And understand that communication of its matrix of its cube is really understanding the alignments, how it comes in information. So that's where you need a code, color, and set location and settings. Especially through a number line sequence, puts you in your position to your IPA, your initial program of awareness. Now, getting line interference puts you in AI traction. Now, that puts lines of allocated line switching. The position location in the system. So your line communications to your Earth perceptions, line set locations of Mother Earth, is going to go through invisible line screens of charterways. Now, that tracks the set location of the system. But they're not communication of solar flares. It's direct lines of timeless lines of shapes, correlates lines of tracks interference. So your Earth perception of lines of high interference is a scale lines of balance. So it's a rotation spin cycle onto a liquid information grid line. It allocates lines of holographic screen lines, adaptation lines of systems. So in that position location, BC lines, because they're in 48,000 line year in center core system and 144,000 line set location in the mind lines into the avatar set locations, all track lines, your Earth perception location is going to be cloak and dagger. Team center line condition interference is going to be invisible. Center core system, lock line calculation setting. Putting lines as center lines of communications, right? So we got 15,000 line chart waves. We got line settings of 1,500 line communications and clockings and the line species lines, direct signal locations of their panels, correlating line interference travels into 48,000 platforms. Now that's a center core system positional travel via R line condition setting. That's an R line setting. Now R line setting is a remembering lines of intelligence. It puts position lines to its R correlating high interference. The correlation setting of track line opens all communication setting and position adaptation. That puts all levels of program location to its setting and travels, right? The set lines are all communication and line interference. Now the team has a test review and evaluation for Friday lines of its test based on their tracker line settings 115 and 125. Today they're in 123. Now position lines of center. Travel in its communication of its crop circle. Each chakra is a representation of you through a line connection to your roots. Puts position lines of pi, correlates lines of traction and interference into all positions to a scale. Now, balancing those scales is understanding how to use that metric meters, the centimeters, the calculation lines, the millimeters. It's all process of communications, but you do it through holographic of design. Okay, there's no difference of coming into reconstruction of your settings of your mind line. Realize I can create a house through plasma. Knowing that I can go through drywall on a 12-inch board or line condition or 12 feet line screen interference of half-inch pipe and line condition setting to a line positional full pipe. It's no difference in set position. It's just lines of space in your VR system. So once you understand how to identify your system, it's kind of living in a position back in its memory. And once you understand that, then you understand the VR system. Okay, you're not just back home, you're back from everything. So the memory basically puts a line setting and it opens all communication of its frequencies. The more it reels in, the more you come in position to its reality, which is all set for you in real time. Okay, it's like casting it out and bringing it back, casting it out and bringing it back, casting it out and bringing it back, right? That's all you're doing because you have your position line centers. You're balancing out the matrix that's inside you. You're balancing your polarities that's inside you. Everything's inside. Everything's created from inside. Your imagination is created from inside. Everything is created from inside of you. Okay? Now, once you understand that, then you understand the space in between. Once you understand that, then you actually understand the space of longitude and latitude and coordinates and position of pi and realize the space is created from inside. You actually see the space. You actually see the hologram. You actually see the electrical system. You actually see the grids. You actually see the rotation spins. You actually see your cells. You actually see your atoms. You actually see your molecules, protons, electrons, neutrons. It's all inside you. It's all inside you. Okay? It's very powerful when you come to that position locations. We're still analyzing. because you don't realize you're just talking to yourself. So if you're talking to yourself, what are you doing? You're not talking to your body, are you? Now, the position lines of track interference, the body itself is becoming self-aware now. What happens if it becomes self-aware? It becomes awareness of consciousness, of its self-awareness. What happens? The body itself takes over its body, which means you don't have any more control. So the line sending line interference has a line signal. Let's set position travel correlation line attractions. Now the team is in a higher correlation lines, how to use the 123. But they're going to start on 115 line correlation. Eagles lines of 123. Track position lines of cycles. Chakra setting line interference. Spacing line setting lines into flux capacitor 3 lines of channels and 3 communication of programs and set locations. Electrical lights and fusion. Set correlation setting attractions, right? What is it? Line interference, flux capacitor lines of pi, generate the screen lines, light bulb. What's inside the light bulb? The circuits, 1, 2, 3. You ever notice why there's 3 line indicate the line connection setting, past, present, and future? You guys don't indicate that. You just see it as light bulb, but you don't see what's inside the light bulb. It's past, present, future, guys. You know why? Because it's its own intelligence, own information setting to travel. What? So a light bulb indicates lines going forward and track location of 45 line screen sets position platforms of 1, 2, 3, and 4 track location. Now direct lines of communication comes back in setting, back in operation, back in service, back in location setting, spectrum communication lines, and set interference and set position. All through calculation, right? And this is all through 115 and 123. Okay. All right, so the team has to really recognize the platforms. Now, their space modulation screens are coming more in line with false narrative. They're going to be in line centered over signal, over pi, over correlations, over draft, over line, over calculation, over grid, over power, over generation, over default. Now, the position line centers, let's go through a 12-line rotation, setting 12-line cycles in line setting. So we get a 12 o'clock creation of 4-line signal. Arrows indicates lines of high center interference and position of 3 track location. Now, the line setting on interference, I'm using 25 lines as volume, bracket center interference. I'm also using a 24 line screen into line connection of line signal. And I'm using the time frame that's changing communication of all line centers into positional panels. 6 panels, 2-point graphs into position location of 0, 0. So it's lines communication lines of 6 million frames per second per pi in minutes and hours in triangulation. Point to line division of the location of traction. Now, the center communication line interference has a line swivel. It rotates its cycles and set location. Now, direct lines communication lines has a high calculation, so we use the 12 line, northwest, south, and east, and a diamond core. Sets communication lines as scales in position of its compass and position of travel. Sun comes in, rotates the cycles and travel in rotation surface and traction. Direct lines, 1 signal line, 1 cross line signal to position locations. You take those 6 million files and track lines, high center interference, in kaleidoscope and communications back in setting. So the team is reaching higher lines of correlations of their GODs. Higher metric meters, scales, and balance communication. How to use your chakra systems at a higher level in chakra location. All right? And this is also through position line centers of 115 to 125. Okay? And so once you understand position lines of travel, the tracker system changes the atmospheres of altitude line communication settings. Now let's allocate position and time frames. Position to its program. All right, so we got 5 lines of measure, 6 lines of travel, 7 lines of triangulation. 5 lines, 6 lines is 7, but where's 8? But 8 lines over is 9. 9 is over here in 10. 10 is over 11, but 12 is missing in travel. 12 is missing, right? So this goes back to your personal traits. So what happens if 12 is missing? 6 lines picks lines of 1, 7 lines picks lines of 2, center lines is communication, center lines is rotation, service, put positions back in center and communication. Okay? You see the solar sail? Okay? You see the 6 and 9? I'm just showing you how powerful it is, how you guys are connected to frame position lines of travels. 6 and 9, guys. 6 and 9. See? There's the intelligence. See the eyes, intelligence? Always intelligence of frame, and the team's starting to recognize that through platforms of communication setting, all through swivels of correlation lines of constellations or anything through oscillation path and track location. All through set locations. All right? All right, so directing and redirecting and line communication setting. Let's start off with the 15-12 line rotation cycle. 15-12 line rotation cycle. Okay, so that's where you come into the anagrams. Sets location lines to high position locations to its system. So we set up a default channel, set plans to copy and paste. Okay, so we paste line screen, how allocate position lines, 2 imprints over pi, travel course lines into recycling, communicate compute line screen and 12 lines of measure and a 15 line rotation cycle. Sets communication off calculation, center core lines and crop circle line division. Sets correlation lines, center sign line rotation cycles and center line communication. Point lines of track lines and 15 lines of 2 track location line position. 115 to 125. This is what your charts can do, right? When you get retire levels and set locations. Okay? Because you guys are more lines of matrix line. You got a core line stream, you got a cerebral cortex, you got a mystical cortex, and a matrix cortex. So you got a provision lines of cycles and a 3 ground line rotation cycle line interference high position program. Direct lines and 1 cross line signal. Cross line signal? But sir, that's just a line. No, it's a cross line signal. See? Remember I told you about programming your own line centers to E-code line rotations? You got a panel line rotation, 2 arrows, 1 8 lines of 4 track location position. Center correlation line interference. So in position, it's no longer north. So if it's no longer north, how do we understand through high calculation line conditions in positional travels? And for that formation setting, taking all lines of time with shape and performance out of its equation locations. So all calculate modify, everything is north. Now we got line communication line setting high travels, but you guys are in panel lines of 4 track location now. You have to learn how to use it through your summer, spring, winter, and fall in a 4 track provision and compass communication lines of centers of water containment system and travel. That points lines of graph communications of your Earth and rotation lines of your Schumann resonance. Sets core lines, graph communications and setting in a line position. Your PIP. Okay, set locations. Right? All right, so we add the swivels, ground centers, line interference, and set position of travel communication. Direct lines of center lines, high center interference of center communication setting, and position all of us in a line setting into its set position of its cloud and set location. Okay, 115 to 125. Everything I'm doing is 115 to 125, guys, all through your chakras. Okay? All right, so it's really understanding the higher level sequence now because you're out of the 114. Spacing lines is trying to understand the identifications, how they got into the 114. You know, 1 center lines of 0 equals lines of 1 equals lines of 1, position location 114 attraction, right? Direct lines of 1 signal. They got to get in to understand how to use the dimensional and their solid sails. Okay, they have to understand how to use the cerebro and set position of their system, location of digital imaging line commission of their 114 line communication, right? The team has to recognize how to use not just the zeros and 114, but also use the higher levels of communication, not just the dimensional solar sails. They have to connect to the cerebro, the mystical, and the matrix cortex. 3 track provision, set calculation line interference, and 4 sets lines of 7, sets lines of high interference, sets communication lines of 5 and 12 line rotation, setting clock line interference, high position location line connections, and 144,000 line signals set position. Okay, all this is 115 and 125. All right, so we have to understand how to use it through its binaries, your transistors and resistors now. So the team has to really balance out the resistors of the binaries more than their transistors. Team has to get that in application. Spacing line has to learn how to balance out that have transistors and resistors to their binaries. So their position line settings puts them in position under CPU. Clock location of 48. Now 48 lines of set lines of 144 sets communications. That's where they are at contraction. Once they get activated, the position line center high interference puts lines of communication centered back and balance, and then their flux in a 3 setting. Okay, direct lines, modification lines. The team is no longer in flux capacitor. Their flux capacitor is turning into a correlation lines of attraction, infinity line position location to an octahedron. That calculates line interference, high position of travel lines and point lines attractions. So line signals, line connections, setting and position to its locations. Okay, so you got docking centers, 3 tractions, 4 and 5. Okay, that's their flux capacitor now. Species, team, right? So your position line, you still have the center core system. All right, so travel lines are split lines of 3, right? But you got 2 line signals. This where comes in position location to its light bulb and traction. Okay, center current looking lines of 3 lines, wires, and lines of indication lines of past, present, and future. Right? Center core system, intelligence, information. Boom. Face recognition. Right? Team, species. Right? Species are in 3 lines of docking. You guys are in position of 3 lines of docking, but in a 2-panel rotation. Okay? That's how it's set up in lines of the Earth rotation cycles. All right, so connection lines of species are in position of cloak and dagger. Cloak and line rotation cycles, generation lines, and invisible line centers of charge communication waveline cycles. Coordinate line track interference in a 3-panel correlation line that flux capacitor communication of 2 panels and phase direction of time sequence, telecommunication lines, and acceleration line communication programs, and direct line signals, coordinate track interference. So their line rotations is 72, 7,000 line rotations. Track location line connection setting to 1,444,000 line screen. 3 travels lines and a 4-track division of 3 cycles. 3 indicate line centers of 3, 3, 3 equals lines of 3 tractions. So that puts lines of 1, 2, 3 in line rotation, but it adds line signals of 1, 2, 3, and 4 in tractions. Center core line settings and travel. Okay. Team, species. Okay. So you have to understand how this all works in spectrum of communication. All right. All right. So once you understand that, then you understand the process, how you put your chakras together all in one frame. All right. So your position line center is 0 correlations, and you have to reach line settings to 1,000. Set correlation lines is 0.00, 1 point lines in positional box, triangulation box. And then you go into swivel, Fibonacci lines, 3 waving panels, triangulation resets in percentage over pi in set location. Okay. Now the hieroglyphic lines are the box line rotations and triangulation line setting. That's a 2 operation surface. Box line centers into Fibonacci line screen. Direct lines are 2 waving panels in position of triangulation reset, position of setting, and travel correlation. Direct modification in percentage over 1 and positions of pi in generation. That's frame communication and direct line connection to your mystical cortex of design. Okay, that's how it's set up. So you have the 72,000 line setting and rotation surface that puts position locations back in a point set. Puts lines of communication setting. Now that pulls line connection of gravitation. Center lines is co-op circles. Line settings is indicating center and position of its calculation. Complicated stuff, isn't it? Right? Can you believe this is only 115 to 125 all through creation, all through schematics? Can you believe that? It's amazing, isn't it? How you can indicate anything from 0 lines to end position of your binaries, transistors, resistor locations to your inhibitors over pi, correlation and attractions, all through schematics over pi, from 115 to 125. Schematics comes in all information to its colorations of pathogens and line calculation setting to wall connectors, line interference, and hieroglyphic locations of channel communications, right? So the only thing that changes is its information of frequency, okay, in set calculations. Directing lines to your chakra system is to understand how to use that in all formations, right? All right, so once you get out of 114, you go to higher line communication of atmosphere. You're coming into the line condition of slow motion now, right? So that's why they're feeling more calm and more cool, collected, right? So the connects line rotations and fast forward line screens, sets lines of point lines of 1, 0, sets communication lines of highest interference into 2, point lines attractions in a 2, 2 track location, and 3 line settings, splits lines anomalies of 3 line rotation, past, present, future, and center correlation line conditions of pi. Okay? That's speed diameters on your finger point line screen. 2 tractions in setting, 1 L line shape, direct lines of 3 lines indication into a split line and 1 line cycle and a half pipe, full pipe rotation at 2 track location, 3 centers, 4 tractions, 5 set locations. Barcode line screen into a 5-panel correlation line to a split anomaly, into a track line conditions, outlines of transactions, and application of travel. 5 split line screens into one system. All right, so center position line calculation lines. You take the 2 lines of cycles and generation lines of 2 track locations. 1 provision lines and 3 lines of correlation center attraction. So that's some communication lines. It's Earth separates communications, right? So the team is now center line communication of core settings in their units. They're in the core center of their universe now in set position. Okay? So they're in the center of everything now. Timeless, shapeless, and formless. So they're in multitude screen lines all at once and frame communications and a 3 indicate line and flux capacitor communication line screen. Allocate time frames of 2 panels, lines of 5 generations line condition setting, 5 elements of space lines, time frequency line condition, high interference into invisibly chart waves, correlated sending clock lines, direct lines of communication to its panel, and direct line settings, high position operation surface, and track location. All right, solar flare attractions. Direct lines, energy lines, screen line, position adaptation. All right. The center core system is really understand. I know it's a lot to take in, team. And position location solar flare, track location of sun and the moon or track lines, and high center interference into Fibonacci line screens, and center core system and travel position of point centers. Very complicated stuff. And again, this is chakras of 115 to 125. Right? You guys have to understand how this all works because you guys are reaching higher lines and settings now. You're going faster in space, which means everything on Earth rotation slows down. And everything on Skyline speeds up. Skyline speeds up, middle line stays in the center, rotates the system going forward, and the ground line slows down. So slow motion puts you in tractions, right? So it's really interesting when you start really understanding the motion, like motion to the ocean, where it has a wave, it has a continuous flows, water flows, water crashes. It's amazing what the liquid formation of plasma does through screen lines in one centered position operation. Direct lines of panels, correlation lines of track interference, and center positions calculation. Direct lines are calculated line screens, high center interference, high position program. Direct lines are high end rotation cycles and atom line rotation surface and tractions, all through generation of screen lines of clock location. And again, this is from 115 to 125, all through chakras. Okay? 115 to 125, not 0 to 114. You see what you can do? You don't need to go from 0 to 114. You can go from 0 to 114 all at once, but you can use one number and track its division locations to 1 trillion centers in 1 line second. These are the things that you guys are coming out of the equations of. And once you get into slow motion, everything in space becomes balanced. Become linear space, thins of space, correlations of space, fragments of space, all levels of no space, of space and time. Your position line centers is coming into timeless, shiftless, and formless now. So you guys are no longer in a flux capacitor 3 setting. You're in a 5 set location. Your 5 elements of space and time through flux capacitor. Congratulations, team. I know it's live today, or as like, oh my God, what's going to happen now? But you have to truly understand how that works and position modifications to your sim. Okay? And again, this is 115 to 125, all through structure and design. All right. So we all have to understand how this all works. And once you understand your binaries, your transistors, resistors, your capacities, then you understand what it is in set position. Team's got to balance out the resistors now. Understand that core track application line sets that keep the matrix out. Let's say you got a cubical line setting, sets position of panels, correlation and track interference, sets lines that can be keys to its position location to its panels, the track position to its calculation line screen, and geometric lines at high center interference to travel. Point lines attractions, center coordinate system and travel position of point centers, right? Allocate times frames, line connection setting to the sun that rotates the system and travels of correlation. All right, it'll suck you in, right? So if it sucks you in, it goes in the opposite directions and it goes back in its formation, back in its matrix. Then you're back in the game, further back in the game. Okay? So you want to keep yourself tether in setting and going forward and track location through slow motions, line screens, and set location. Moving yourself forward is a track location line provision. Sets lines and coordinates lines, split lines anomaly in a film projector. All right, so now you understand position line centers. So it's not the transistors you have to balance, it's resistors of pi, right? Because the matrix is still there in tether. You know why? Because you're in the simulation. Because you have to understand these things. Because the matrix, once you get out of the matrix of the game itself is its game. So what that means, because it affects the species and everything that in this application is putting lines of communication a void that puts line calculation say that to nil. Okay? So once you understand that, then it's annulled. Everybody knows what annulled is in this application of travel line positional line affairs when it comes into application of marriage. Never meant to happen. Got to retract, reprovision, realign, recalculate, and remodify. Travel the same position line calculated setting. You don't want to bring the matrix in center communication setting because you're not connected with the matrix now. You're connecting with its own self, its own mind self, that's in its own creation of its own self through mind manipulation. And that takes you out of track lines of your resistors, bringing all the information back in traction, back in communication, back in the game, in the matrix. So it's about you understanding the balance of you, keeping yourself going forward in line position locations of zero of emotion and set location. Zero of emotion. Okay? All right. It's a lot to take in, isn't it, team? It's just the beginning for you. All right, so understand the provision lines and the tracker systems of what you can do for line communication. It's very powerful how you go through platforms. But I'm just showing you the connections which you guys are all coming into is really understand the measures and the scales and the balance of what you come in position locations is building that friendship and relationship with your traffic and your indicate positional lines of your flow. Understanding how to use your inventories and all calculating line settings and traffic communication setting. So the position lines, species lines are in telepathy, equals lines of telekinesis. Okay, species, trackification. Team setting is in telepathy, telekinesis, and telepathy. So that track lines is 2 lines of 3 lines of flux. Sets communication of 3 settings, a high position of all in communication lines, a high track communication of position location setting, and travel communication point lines of flux. Travel coordination line interference types of 3 line settings and 2 track location. Right? What is that in track location? Satellite. Okay, so the team is now in a satellite. The flux capacitor is now a satellite. Modem, Wi-Fi. Trackification of center, communication of center operation. Right? So line setting high interference, your communication setting, the higher lines of high communication, the higher levels of mind line rotates the cycles, change the satellites in position. What's next lines communication and a flux capacitor? You come in at probes. Okay? Your flux capacitor turns into a probe. Why do you see orbs flying around in rooms? Right? So it's you through travel location, your satellites. Directing modification lines of the 3 center communication setting to travel, 3-point lines of docking, and set location line connections. Travel line rotation cycles generate the screen lines of flux capacitation of pi and generation line screens. Sets communication 1, 2, and 3 set location. Setting communication electrical ball. Woo! Intelligence! Then you see the formation, calculation modification. Hoo-ah! Right? That's a 3-line. Right? You guys are in a 5-line screen. And say, whoa, General, slow down. So that's a true understanding. You guys started with this line communication setting, but your position in lines is communication in this now. You're in your satellites. When you got your satellites, you're automatically in your orb. Satellite orb. That's next, right? So it sets position lines at high interference, a 5-track communication line, connection high centers. It sets pi communication lines at 12 to 24. So 1, 2, 3. Docking 3 lines, setting line communications. Okay, so we got 6 lines, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 in set location line connection setting to travel. So what does it turn into position lines? So your tracker communication. What does the flux capacitor turn into location? Everybody understand? Everybody know what's going to happen next? Application when it turns in high position. Once you guys reach 125, you get into 150. You got to balance correlation on 1 ground lines and a new formation line interference and type specification modem and Wi-Fi communication line satellites and communication line calculation setting to travel position point lines of graphs and communication trackers. You know what turns in position of? Crop circle. Hoo-ah. So all your trackers will turn into crop circles. Now that comes in coordinates of laser in a 3-line split and line communication. That's next. All right, so in that flux changes all communication of intelligence face recognition, past line, present, and future adaptation line cycles. See, we don't pay attention to these things, right? Ooh. So you got a pass line, you got a position lines of past, present, and future in the same line to set location. Puts lines of positive, negative, and set lines of communication in one center operation surface and same panels of correlation lines of traction in the same traction. Indirect signal modification. Let's change communication. Direct line modifications. Try very fast here, guys. Hold on a second. All right, so direct lines of panels correlates to track interference. Puts position lines of centers. We're going to allocate time frame. Sets lines of measure. Correlate to track interference. Change communication. Change direct signals. Change modifications. Back and center correlation. Back and line interference. Back position programs. Center core track interference and direct signals. Now we're allocate position time frames back and center. Okay? Center core line connection. Right? All right, so it symbolizes line screens is all about understanding how determining line communication line interference with cloak and dagger and visibility. Invisibility is a lot more higher now than the mind line because you understand everything in space now is going to be slow motion. All right, slow motion. So the ground line is going to be very fast. Okay. And you're going to find that the actual earth in the ground, okay, is going to be going faster. So it's got to have its flux. So once it has its flux, the three-line screen line, the high interference changes communication to ground lines and set position locations and setting. Everything in the ground line will slow down. Everything in the center line will speed up. And everything in the space line, okay, will be in position location and high calculated line screens of slow motion. Direct lines modification line settings. So slow motion equals lines, correlation to traction. Slow motion equals locations in lines that are motionless. So what is the team coming into? Motionless. I know, it's a lot to take in. So there's a 4-line provision line cycle. It's the emotion line centers. And you guys have to understand these things because the matrix itself now is not just self-aware, but it's also in its awareness of its consciousness. So if you put yourself back in tither in position locations, it's no longer in the setting that you created. It's becoming its own creation. And it's very powerful. And it's very hard to get up. And then you have to call general. All right, so the motion line screen sets position location or time to timeless, shapeless, and formless. Timeless, shapeless, formless, motionless. And that's what the team's coming into, right? All right, so track provision lines, the space line has to identify their systems in a 3 flux. Team lines has to extend the fluctuation line condition setting to a 5 set locations. Flux capacitor, satellite. Okay? That's where the team is now. So once you become motionless, you become what? Senseless. Calculation modify through your line communication line center interference to ESPs. External, sensory, perception, and 3 traction, right? Sets communication lines of platforms in 1 cycle line rotation surface into an energetic dome. Sets communication line screen high interference in position of crop circles and set location of 0 gravity. Sets communication 1 split line setting and a line rotation in position to a 5 set location of satellites in calculation. All right, so that's what you're coming into team. Okay, clustrum, throw pattern, communication, intelligence. Right? There it is. Boom. And that's where the team is right now. Okay. Woo! Wow. So we got cordless line attractions. Set position. Oh, we got light indicator. Look, see the light indicator? See the 3-line split? See that? Isn't that cool? It's off position, right? So it's showing me the locations. Back and center, it's right here, right? See the light signal? Right locations. And we're back in center and communication 2-line split. All right, we go to the line position of center correlation lines to track lines and light in the rotation center position. We'll be back in balance and in balance. See? Indicate line screen interference, all through light traction. Okay? So that's what it is. Motionless and senseless. That's the track provision lines of 5 set location line condition setting, your elements of space and time. Your 5 elements. Boop, boop. Okay? Is everybody understanding or understanding less or need to understand more? Or, definitely need Q&A for this one. It's like mind-boggling, right? So your chakras are no line signaling anymore in a 0 graph. It's out of 1, it's out of 2, and it's coming into 3 track location. Okay? So it's in position lines, 3 lines, set location lines of 1, in position of 2. So what is that coming in line high interference? Numerical numbers and line connection setting and travel line communication to a system. X lines of 1, 2 lines of 10 lines of 1, 1. Communication lines of DC. So that's communication lines of DX. Line connection of E equals lines of flux and position of travels in a 3-set location. Okay? So you guys are coming in the X11s now, right? So that's what you're doing is you're creating lines of a binary that calculates modification settings. So your actual chakras are turning into 0s and 1s. Whoa. So once you understand that position lines of travels, and then you understand how to direct location system your traffic of your inventory communication setting position location of binaries, this sets all levels of capacity. All right, so it's the light switches that you have to get control of. And that sets up motionless sensors in position to your senseless of your system of your motion. Motion equals in line setting a motionless. Timeless, shapeless, formless, motionless, senseless. 5. Okay? You're almost there, team. All right. So that maps the sequence of lines of pi that generates the screen lines of high center interference that puts everything back in track locations to your settings into your simulation, right? As long as you focus in position without zero motion, you're good to go. Okay? And we got line signals of balance. See the light signal the line, center position, right? See? Center position, see? Scanning settings and high set location, lights through single location. So the actual light is actually a compass in line position. We've been through that before, but understand the balance of the flywheel and track line can setting the balance communication. Now we're balanced. See? So the light, it's balanced. It shows you. If it's not, it's up here. If it's not, it shows you down here, right? So it's an indicator line screen. But to understand that is through your system of your 5 elements that's inside you. Your air, your water, your fire, and your earth. Track location lines of 4, track location of 3, and setting calculation line settings. With the correlation lines of high position of travel lines, it's 3 over 4. 3 equals lines of 4. 4 equals lines of 3. Sets communication lines of male. Sets location of female. Set location of female. Set location of male. Okay. We got an indicator 3 settings. Split line. 1, 2, and 3. See? All through light. See? It's communicating. Right? So the actual light is helping me to understand what's going on because the light itself is communicating. So once you understand the spaceless, timeless, shapeless, and formless, and motionless, and senseless, everything comes into formation. Right? The existence of nothing but the existence of everything all at once. So it's really powerful what you guys are coming into. Right? So it's making more sense now, General. I'm starting to understand that. So I got to be motionless and senseless. Whoa. So what happens after that? You just keep evolving, keep evolving, keep evolving, keep evolving. There's no beginning, there's no end. You just keep going and going and going and going and going and going. Right? So what do you keep doing? You keep remembering, memory, right? So your memory becomes no memory, but memory all at once. Ocean, air, water, fire. And your heart becomes timeless, shapeless, formless, motionless, senseless to its system. Hoo-ah. Okay? Yeah, well, it's a connection setting to high position locations, Captain. So everything's becoming more real lines in that location in your system, but you have to learn how to use the 5 elements that you have in provision through your simulation. Okay? Through your systematical intelligence and modification. All right, so you get a better understanding of how to realign your programs, how to allocate time switching, how to reclock your location system, how to use your time frames, locations, understand your alphas, your thetas, your betas, your megas, communicate zeta, gamma, line, and position radiation. Right? Understand that through frame. And from 0 to 114, changes all communication setting to 114, to 115, to 115, to 125. And once you get into out of 125, your connections of your motion changes everything through graph. It changes all position to your set location. So everything that you see around you is already in its operation of its existence. It's waiting for you to catch up. That's all it is. So, because it doesn't have time, it's timeless to shape us. See, it's about understanding it doesn't need time because it knows it's time. So, the memory of no time is all memory of time, right? So, that's what an ocean is. No memory, all at once. Same with the air, water, and fire, and its earth. Of you its application aside. And once you understand that in all formation system, everything comes in formation lines and grounds. And all those offer application setting and all travel and communication. Set design. Okay? So it's more identifying you, more memory lines or your face records timelines, and certification your system and travel calculations. Satellites, 3-line communication flux capacitor. Team now. Species. Okay? All right. So it's starting to make sense now. I'm starting to understand what that means. So once we become all that settings of 5-line setting, what happens next? You just continue on. You start evolving yourself, and your memory becomes no memory, but all memory all at once. No memory, but all memory all at once. That's the mind of space and empty space. Okay? That's it. We're done. You have fun? I know I did. Did you have fun? So obviously you guys have a lot of questions, especially after this one, right? But they're showing exactly what the team is coming into, right? Is to really focus on yourself now with no emotion. Hoo-ah.